the average clothing size for women in 2016 was a 16, yet most retail stores hardly hold anything above a size 12.
And so, if you want to transition the conversation a little bit to the difficulties of being a fat individual, because I feel like you got to talk a lot about earlier about the stereotypes that come with that, and just people making all these assumptions as we keep bringing up about fat people. If you want to just talk a little bit more about some other difficulties that are there.
Sure. So I have a list of facts that I got from an amazing coach named Ivy Felicia. You can check her out on Instagram as well. She did I believe it was her. She participated in a panel or presentation back in 2018 at the NEDA conference in Philly. NEDA is the National Eating Disorder Association that I'm pretty well integrated into right now as far as my advocacy. So I'm going to read off a few facts just so we can kind of understand fat phobia as a systemic issue. Fat phobia is essentially, if you think of the word, it means fear of fat or fear of fat people. So first I'm going to talk about systemic issues, and then I'll go into like my personal experiences. So the first fact is the average clothing size for women in 2016 was a 16, yet most retail stores hardly hold anything above a size 12. Teachers report that they have lower expectations for fat students in comparison to thinner students. Studies show that there have been a 50+ increase in size discrimination between 1996 and 2006. People in larger bodies are paid less than their thinner counterparts. In fact, workers who are heavier than the average are paid $1.25 less an hour. People in larger bodies are consistently granted fewer promotions and raises than their thinner counterparts. 26% of people, 50% or more above their ideal weight on the height weights charts, reported that they were denied benefits such as health insurance because of their weight. 90% of emergency rooms are lacking basic equipment like scanners that can accommodate people in larger bodies. A study from 2003 found that more than 50% of doctors report feeling frustrated by patients in larger bodies. The majority of doctor visits for patients in larger bodies are recorded as lasting a shorter length of time than visits from folks in thinner bodies for the same ailment. And a whopping 81% of dietetic students report having prejudice against people in larger bodies. So that's a simple overview and not all encompassing of what fat phobia does as a system. I wanted to share all of those facts because there's something I had never heard before, even as a fat person, and I think most people haven't heard those facts. As you mentioned, the wage gap is something that was very surprising to me, especially because I'm living in a fatter body. So that means that I'm gonna, over the course of my lifetime, make less money than someone who's in a thinner body. Even though I work hella hard and I'm doing all the things, there are some things in the system that I can't counteract. And I also want to mention that even though I identify as a fat person, on the scale of like small fat to like super fat, which is, there are terms in between. I'm more on the smaller fat side, or like medium fat. So I experienced the repercussions of being a fat person on a lesser scale than a super fat person. And it also surprised me the level of access when it comes to healthcare. Like the 90% of emergency rooms don't have scanners or equipment to take care of fat people. I mean, it's scary. Like they will miss diseases and other issues that fat people have because they just simply do not have the equipment, and which over the long run leads to more fat people dying in hospitals. So as a fat person, that's freaking scary. And then as far as access, which I talked about in my webinar, if you think about like simply restaurant chairs or booths or chairs on airplanes. All of these things are small. For chairs, normal chairs, like the ones that have armrests on the side, like even as a smaller fat person, my butt like fits, but like it can sometimes not be comfortable. And then for booths, like some of the tables are stuck to the ground, so you can't like some people can't even fit into the booth. And then on airplanes, like even as a small fat person, as a small like I'm short woman, I still like get looks and people not wanting to sit next to me on the plane just by like how I look, which like it's I experience it again. I experience it to such a lesser level than people bigger than me, and that's really important because um, the fat community has a hierarchy of related to access, and that sitting in chairs is just one of them. I mean, there are so many different things that are related to what a fat person goes through, and from a personal level, like I mentioned, I like feel like I'm working hella hard. I'm doing all the things. I'm really thriving in a lot of ways in my life. But some people will never respect me simply by the way I look. Luckily, I work in a community that loves me for who I am and respects and understands the issues of fat phobia in our system, which is partially why I chose to work in the places that I'm working. But I have limited, if I was to work in other places, I experience higher levels of discrimination based on what I look like. So it's really a human issue, and I state all those facts because they're shocking, but I share my personal experiences because I'm human, and fat people are human and deserve to be treated with respect and love, and no matter what size they are, no matter how much they exercise, no matter what they eat, fat people are people. So like, why can't we treat them like people?
Absolutely, absolutely agree with you. We obviously want to treat everyone with respect, but definitely it's interesting how when someone is of a larger size, it's like, well, if people are not really getting along with them, it's like the first insult is like, it's like that's where they're getting taken down by. I remember seeing this video and it was like these people were like it was like these like larger people on the beach and they were Trump supporters and people are like walking past them like
Mhm.
being mean to them because they're Trump supporters. I mean, I think we should just like respect everyone and like I think we should all just mind each other's like business. But they were they to take that woman down, they called her like fat ass and like they called out her weight and it was just like that had nothing like you obviously oppose this person because of their political views, but it's like, why are you coming at them for their looks now? Like that had nothing to do with the entire conversation, the entire argument between the two. But it's like,
Yeah,
okay, it doesn't even matter what you think anymore. It's like the fact that you're fat, like, is the my mic
makes
drop,
you drop. Yeah,
And yeah.
I was gonna mention because you say that like Trump has actually experienced a lot of fat shaming in his career recently, and I am a very strongly liberal person. I very strongly disagree with pretty much all of President Trump's policies and his administration's policies. However, when I see people insult him because of what he looks like or because he's fat, I feel a sense of camaraderie with him. I'm like, damn, I've been made fun of because I'm fat and because of what I look like, and that makes me more sympathetic to him. Like, there's no reason that anyone should be even commenting on people's bodies, and the fact that they don't respect him, but they are saying they don't respect him because of his body, not because of his policies. Attack the policy, not the person.
I think we need to stop and this is one of the reasons why I like love like talking about these issues. I think we need to stop making fun of other people for their looks because for all the people that do that, they are only furthering their own insecurities, and they're also making the people around them feel insecure. So when you have someone say like, oh, well, her nose looks like that. And even if it's not directed towards me, but when I hear that comment, then I'm all of a sudden like, oh, but what about my nose? If you don't like someone, it's because of their personality, not because of how they look, and keep their looks out of it. They cannot control that. It's not easy to control your weight. They can't control their skin color. They can't control the shape of their nose. I mean, they could get plastic surgery, but not all people want to do that. I certainly don't.
And it's
So
dangerous.
it's like we have to focus on, like you said, focus on the policies, focus on what their intentions are in life, not their image.
Yeah.
And another point that you brought up that you kind of talked about in your whole spiel, so I'm trying to like catch up on all of those, is when you talked about like the inequalities in the doctor's office, and you were saying that like doctors are more likely to be frustrated with like larger individuals. And I'm saying this as a devil's advocate, or for those representing the other side of this argument, is some people would say, oh, well, doctors are probably more frustrated with larger people because, well, they insist on living a more unhealthy lifestyle. So how would you comment on that?
So it's very complicated. Part of what I would say is that it's not a doctor's job to decide how a person lives or the morality of the way of someone. A doctor's job is to ensure that they are healthy and living a healthy life. But doctors also treat a lot of sick people. And fat people, like I said, have a variety of factors for the reason that they're fat. And I personally have an amazing doctor who has never mentioned anything about my weight because I'm able to do most of what I would like to do. The word unhealthy is also very complicated because it's dependent on like what does unhealthy mean. It's a very biased word as far as does healthy mean that you're going to live longer, or does healthy mean that that you weigh less? And when it comes to doctors having biases or preconceived notions of fat people, whatever the reason is that they have it, or whether it's right or wrong, the reality is that they treat patients with a lesser standard of care, which in turn, maybe they were unhealthy before, but now that a doctor's not taking care of them as well as they would take care of a thinner person, they're going to be even more unhealthy because maybe a doctor prescribes weight loss for a stomach pain issue, or because a muscle pain issue, and in reality, like that muscle pain was like cancer or anything else. There's a generally accepted fact that fat women get higher rates of breast cancer. What one of my friends did research on finds that the reason that fat women die or have a higher rate of breast cancer, is because they were not screened as early, because their issues and their concerns were not taken legitimately, or their doctors just didn't take the time to screen them. In addition, there might have not been the instruments available to screen their breasts. They might have not had access to those things that thinner people have. So when people say, oh, maybe they're frustrated because they see you as more unhealthy, well, doctors are supposed to treat healthy and non-healthy people. It doesn't matter. They need to treat people the same and with the same amount of access and care that they would a thinner person. It's the same. I mean, I see it as the same as a racial issue personally. Like, they should treat white people the same as they treat black people, and if they don't, it's discrimination.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree with you. And I see your whole point of um in lack of access in doctors' offices. You are creating an environment that may where issues could have been prevented or health issues could have been prevented. You are almost encouraging that by not having the necessary resources available and necessary tools available for larger size people. So
Yeah.
it's like the
And
issues kind of exacerbated there. So it's like it shouldn't be the focus shouldn't even really be how frustrated are the doctors. It should be you have patients of all these different sizes and you need to be inclusive for all of those different sizes. So even though you may even want some of your patients to lose weight so things can be more accessible for them, it's like, well, you should at least try to have, more resources that accommodate these individuals because there's not always the time if they have an issue, a health issue that needs to be addressed, they don't know, there's not always a time to just be like, well, if you lose 50 pounds, then we'll be able to check this easier. Like, no, you need to be able to check these things like now, like any cancers or anything like that need to be able to be checked now.
I mean, can you imagine like a doctor telling a thin person, okay, you better gain 50 pounds or you're not going to be able to get checked for cancer? That wouldn't fly. Or someone, a thin person coming in for the same issue and them being like, you need to gain 10 pounds and then I'll check, like, and that will solve your issue, when in reality, like, they should just get checked for their issue no matter what it is. And I wanted to mention one more thing is with all of these issues that come from the system, it creates a really hostile environment that creates higher levels of mental illness issues, and mental health issues in fat communities. And it's not because they're fat, it's because they're systemically oppressed. And this is across the board as far as it goes to like just people who are discriminated against and oppressed. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
The issue is like, well, if that issue applied to everyone, then it's like, oh, okay, then we would make it more inclusive. But, now because it doesn't apply to everyone, it's like, well, we're just going to make this, only accessible for individuals that are smaller sizes and that aren't fat.
And it actually, the interesting thing is that when you look at clothing sizes, I don't have the fact with me, but I believe this is the fact, is that 76% of women are considered plus size who buy clothing. And it was a quote by Tim Gunn, and there are so many companies that don't provide plus size clothing, and they're losing money because they refuse to provide clothing for plus size women, for fat people. And it's simply based on prejudice. They're losing money. It doesn't make sense in a capitalist society to not provide the product for people who want it or who are going to buy it. So it is such a strange world we're living in, where actually the majority of people are not receiving access to all these things. And like I said, access depends on where you are on the spectrum, within the fat spectrum. But if the main thing is like, if one person is not getting adequate healthcare, who is to say that you're not going to get adequate healthcare the next time? You know?
And kind of just talking about the difficulties of being a fat person is I remember seeing, and just talking about access and inclusivity, I remember seeing someone like made a gym for larger size people just because in most gyms like a lot of like fat people feel like they're being judged and stuff like that. I think that we just need to create a world in which like we don't have to do things like that. We don't have to create a gym especially for larger people, because I would hope that our gyms are inclusive enough for those individuals. I would just hope that we could create a world where we do have sizes that fit larger women.
When it comes to like, I think I agree with you. The long-term goal is that we all can coexist peacefully and like respect each other. if you think about it, it's going to take a really long time to get there. I mean, it's a systemic issue, so it's not just like people just hate fat people. They're taught to hate fat people. I was taught to hate myself from a very young age. I talk about that on my Instagram. I was taught to hate myself. It wasn't because my parents were bad. It was because they were taught to hate fat people as well. They were taught to hate themselves. And so when it comes to those things, those, like when you talk about the gym for only fat people, like that sounds amazing to me, because yeah, I go to the gym, and no matter how confident I am, and no matter, like, in some way, and some of the time I think it's because I'm a woman and I'm weightlifting, and that's what makes me feel uncomfortable. But a lot of the time it's because I'm a bigger person, a fatter person, and I know that because I'm like, nobody else is staring at everybody else. So and I'm the only bigger person in the gym. So as we move forward, creating these safe spaces is amazing. So it makes people feel comfortable, but also the long-term goal is, of course, to provide a generally safe space, but a safe world for people to exist in. So that's a very hard and complicated problem, and will not be solved overnight or next